Hey, what's up guys? It's Shamrocked here with a dungeon guide for you. This is actually the first dungeon guide I have for Season 3, which is pretty exciting. We're going to be kicking things off with a 19 Gambit, which I believe at the time of this video is top 3 in the world for Gambit, which is pretty cool. So Gambit is widely regarded as one of the easier keys, and I agree with that. There's only like one really hard healing check, which I think would be the last boss. Otherwise, there are a few other tricky points in the dungeon, but nothing too hard. So we're just going to go through this pull by pull, boss by boss, and I will just narrate how our group dealt with things as well as how I dealt with it like as a healer. If you're looking for a video with no commentary, you just want to hear the group comms and the game sounds, you can actually find this video also on my Twitch stream, Shamrock the Shaman. I will link it in the video details. I have it highlighted as like a video in there, so if you go to my stream, you can just like click on that and actually view the video. I might start uploading the non-commentary videos to YouTube as well, just so people have another way to watch it. So if that's something that would interest you, please let me know. I probably won't do it if nobody wants it, but I'd be interested to hear your take on whether or not you'd actually want to hear like the raw video with no voiceover or narration. Okay, before we get into the run, let's just take a quick look at the talents. So looking at the class talent tree, there's really nothing that is like super important for Gambit other than Spirit Wolf. So Spirit Wolf is going to help you avoid the one-shot damage on the last boss if you're pushing really high keys. And the one-shot damage, I'll explain when we get there, is just when she does her shield and like everybody has to like position their arrow and you take that big burst of damage. I also take Hex for this dungeon. This is just specific to our comp and our route. So if you don't need Hex for your route, then obviously you don't have to take this talent. You could put this into Primordial Bond if you want a bit of a bigger defensive with Earth Ellie. You could put it into Fire and Ice if you want to do just a little bit more damage. You put it into Gust of Wind if you want more mobility. Like there's a lot of things you could do with this talent, so just throw it where you want. But in terms of like what you need for this dungeon, I would say Spirit Wolf is like really the main thing. You could also think about taking Earth Grab Totem for the dragon boss, but I find unless you're doing hard mode where you need to hit the ads twice with the breath, Earth Grab Totem is not really needed as long as you like bait the ads properly, which I will talk about when we actually get to that boss. Looking at the right side talents, nothing fancy here. This is pretty much the standard build I've been running. The only thing I sort of alternate between is Earth and Harmony and Therazane's Resilience, alternating with 2 points and Ancestral Awakening. I've been playing a lot with Ancestral Awakening recently, just because for Farseer you are hitting Healing Surge quite a bit, and Riptide as well, and they're really big chunky heals, so you're getting a lot of value out of Ancestral Awakening compared to Totemic. And I also find that Therazane's Resilience, although probably one of my favorite talents for like maintenance and quality of life, because you like don't have to refresh her shield, it's not necessary. It's more of just like a talent that's nice to have. So yeah, so as I'm pushing higher into these keys and seeing more healing checks that are harder to reach, I am trying out Ancestral Awakening, and so far I like the results. So once again, pick whatever you want. That's just the two that I fluctuate between. Just do whatever makes you happy. I will put this talent loadout in the details for this video guide too, so if you want to just straight copy it from there, you can. That's pretty much it for all the talents, so with that out of the way, let's take a look at the actual dungeon run itself. Okay, so the first area of Gambit is pretty much just about ad control. You want to make sure you have kicks on all of the casters here, which are, I believe, the Fishmancers, these little like blue Murlocs. Our first pull has, I think, 4 or 5 kicks, so you just want everybody assigned, and then when kicks are out, you just like assign group stops like Thundershock or Blinding Sleet or anything like that you can in the group. In terms of like a healing standpoint, the only hard part about these pulls are if bolts go off, either multiple bolts on the same person, it probably will kill them on higher keys, or if a bolt goes off right before or during the tidal stomp that the giant does, that can obviously just combo someone as well. So as a Resto Shaman, you want to be watching for these tidal stomps. You want to make sure you get Vigor on the group via a chain heal a few seconds before the tidal stomp goes out, just to make sure everybody has 10% increased HP. So on higher keys, A, they survive the stomp, but B, even on lower keys, if somebody does happen to get comboed, you at least have a little bit of cushion there for them. Additionally, I forget what they're called, but the melee dudes, the melee Murlocs, at 50% health, they will cast their Cry of Murgle Gurgle or whatever it is, and that will basically just like buff all of the mobs around it. So if that cast goes off and then any of like the Fishmancer bolts go off or whatever, you are basically just going to die from the bolts by getting one shot. So it's really important that you get a kick on those melee dudes when they hit 50% health. And then I believe they do continue to cast like every 30 seconds or so after that. So just make sure you're still watching them, especially if they run out. Make sure you are keeping an Earthbind totem down whenever you can to make all of the mobs slower as they try to run out. If you are spec'd into Earth Grab Totem, that can also help. However, it's not really going to make that much of a difference because the root breaks immediately once damage is taken, and everything is going to be taking damage even when it's running out. And finally, for these packs, we also have the Scalebinders, which are the white Murlocs. They put the fish stick down, which is like what you saw there. It's like a big totem that will heal. It basically pulses and heals all the adds near it, and I believe it reduces the damage they take. So there's two ways to handle this. You can either kill the fish sticks, or you can kite the mobs away. The recently, with like I think before the season started, in one of the PTR patches, they made it so they act as like like the totems, the fish sticks. They made it so they actually take damage from AoE attacks. So they do die pretty quickly. And they don't have a lot of health. So we find it's like much easier to just kill them unless the pack is almost dead, at which point we'll just kill the Scalebinder and the fish stick will despawn. Going into this pull here, we're actually going to chain this small pack into the pack to the right, and we're going to get the giant that's padding through here as well. So because we're still waiting on the giant, we're kind of just like getting this pack a lot lower, maybe killing off one of the casters before we go into the next one. And just like the first pull and really every pull in this area, you want to make sure you have at least one person watching each of the casters. And if the group has no kicks available, that's a really good point to use like a stun totem or a knock up or whatever else your group has. I also find if you're running the Lumathar trinket, that is a really good way to save somebody from getting comboed in the case that you let an interrupt go off. So for instance, if the Tidal Stomp is coming out and there is a fish stick, or sorry, not a fish stick, if there is a Fishmancer that casts a bolt at the same time and no one can stop it, you can probably save that person with the Lumi trinket. You can also, like, if you're just nervous after a stomp goes off, which is what I just did a couple of seconds ago, if you're just like unsure and there's a lot of mobs and you're worried about somebody getting bolted or meleeed or whatever, you can just use the shield after the Tidal Stomp goes off, as it's just going to like prevent, once again, anybody from getting comboed by anything that you might not be expecting. So, and once again, this is a 19, so the Tidal Stomp is obviously hitting very hard. I think with no DRs or anything, it's getting most of us down to about 10% health, but with Vigor, obviously that makes it a lot easier to survive. And then people can use the Not Even Close website that Ortimus created. I believe it's just like notevenclose.com. Just Google it, Google WoW Not Even Close, and it will show it. And that is a good way to calculate whether or not something is going to like one-shot you on a higher key. All right, and once this pack is done, we will be doing some CCs and moving on to the pack for the boss, although not without one more stomp. It's also good to have some sort of timer, whether it's DBM or somebody like a week or a pack for the season that shows you when the stomps are going off. Just makes it a little bit easier to plan ahead and make sure that you are ready and have the group topped and vigored before those abilities go out. So normally what we do is we cage one of the Scalebinders on the left and we hex the Scalebinder on the right. However, we jumped in and pulled aggro before I could get the hex off, so we're actually going to be killing a Scalebinder here. But normally you wouldn't have to deal with the fish sticks in this pull if you're doing the route that we do. You are just once again kicking the Fishmancers, and you are making sure you get that cry when the melee dudes get to about 50%. And then we're going to pull, so the Scalebinders, those are the ones that do the fish sticks. We are actually going to pull them into the next pack and into the boss, as their fish sticks don't affect any non-Murloc mobs, so it won't heal these like Guardian, electric Guardian dudes that we're about to pull in a second. All right, we're just going to finish this Shell Crusher off. That's the name of the melee guys, by the way, the Shell Crusher. So once those guys hit 50%, they're the ones that do the cry, and then about 30 seconds after. All right, we just interrupted our last cry. Melee and myself are going to stick back here and finish off this ad as everybody else runs forward. And then we're basically going to pull this entire pack into the next boss, which does look a little bit scary, but as long as your tank is able to handle all of the, obviously like the melee damage from all the ads, and is able to aim those lines properly, this pull onto boss is not that bad. Once again, the Murlocs don't do anything at all, so those fish sticks will not heal or give DR to non-Murloc enemies, so you literally don't have to worry about them. We're just using them as funnel for our damage. So these Guardians, they do a charged pulse, which is a big circle around them. Obviously, you want to just avoid that. And then they also do the lines that you see. Those lines currently only target the tank, so as long as your tank is aware that they're coming out, they can aim them every single time, which makes the fight a lot easier if they aim them into good spots. For this boss on a higher key, all you really have to worry about are the purifying bursts, as well as getting kicks on the adds. So because we're on a 19 and we're in one-shot territory, every time I see a purifying burst come out, I'm calling it, and I am using a chain heal to put vigor on the group. If there's a lot of adds coming out, and I'm once again worried about somebody getting comboed by the purifying burst and something else, I will use my Lumathar trinket, which I did for that second purifying burst there when the adds came out. Otherwise, these little adds, the Vault Purifiers, they do have to die before this intermission phase, or at least during it, as they will basically block the consoles that you have to use. And normally I get the console, but just once again, there's a lot of adds here. We're trying to finish things up. So Shad went and got it. We see where all the runes are, and we go and we put them in and finish off any purifiers, and then the boss is going to become active again. Once again, if you're healing, it's better to let a DPS do what they need to do, like we just saw, while you focus on keeping the tank alive, as this is a tough pull for the tank. The other mechanics that this boss does is he targets somebody with a line. So if you get that, hopefully you'll see I get targeted with it, because I try to always keep them in the back corner. As a healer, you should be able to place those lines properly every single time. There's no reason for you to be up near the boss or anywhere. Also, when those little adds jump out, make sure you're not standing near them like I did just there, as you will get melee by them just from healer aggro before your tank gets aggro. And as I said, if you're watching, every time we see a purifying burst go out, I am putting a chain heal on the group about 3 or so seconds before the actual purifying burst goes off, just to give people extra health via vigor. The last thing that the adds do I didn't mention, like I said, they do cast, so you do have to interrupt them. They also do a channeled empowered defense cast. So once that cast goes off, they channel into the boss and he takes less damage. So that is a good point to use stuns, knockups, anything like that, any CC you have, just to stop that channel. It's better to wait until they actually get the channel off before you stop, as if you cancel the cast before the actual channel is like channeling, it'll just recast it. So you want to wait until it actually gets the cast off and is channeling the ability, and then you can just knock it up, and that will stop it from casting for a bit. Otherwise, this boss is like super easy. I think it's one of the easiest bosses this season. It's really only difficult at the very beginning if you're doing a big pull like we did. In terms of your like Farseer abilities, like Ancestral Swiftness and Unleash Life, you'll notice that throughout pretty much all of the key, I'm not just sending Ancestral Swiftness on cooldown, I am sometimes saving it for if a damage ability is incoming, just to make my life easier. And also, I mean, so far this season, from what it looks like, it's not really it's not a timer season, like in the sense that you're like losing to timers. So far it looks like you're losing to damage. So although it's nice to like get healer damage in whenever you can, it's much more important that you keep your group alive. So sending Ancestral Swiftness on cooldown for the sake of like getting a few hundred extra K DPS in is not necessarily worth it for a lot of these keys on the higher end. Just make sure you're keeping your group alive and they will do the DPS that they need to do. And then you'll see once all the adds were dead and it's a little bit less chaotic and we don't have to worry about our tank dying, I am basically doing the console every single time, just because it allows for better uptime on the boss from the DPS, and it's just easier for the tank to sort of get situated again afterwards. You will likely get about 3 phases on higher keys, like 3 times where you have to do the console. On lower keys, you'll probably only get about 2. But yeah, like I said, this boss is super easy. All you really have to worry about on a higher key is just making sure nobody gets one-shot or comboed by the Purifying Burst. And that's easy enough to do with the Lumathar Trinket, as well as with our Ancestral Vigor talent, which gives everybody 10% more HP when you heal them. Okay, so that's the first area and the first boss. Probably the easiest part of the key by far, as long as you have a good control over kicks and CC. The next couple of parts are a lot more difficult. So the second part, which we're about to go into, there's a few things you have to worry about. You have to worry about the Tide Sages, as they are just going to cast and put these big circles on the ground, much like the Murlocs in the first area. They're pretty much the same thing. The melee dudes here, the Hourglass, Tide, whatever's, they are going to do a like Super Saiyan cast, which just is like an Enrage on them. If you have a Soothe, you can soothe them. Obviously, it'll help your tank out. But if you don't, your tank either needs to kite or obviously pop like whatever walls they have to make sure that they live. On a 19, these guys hit very hard. As you can see, our tank, his HP is like totally yo-yoing. And this is like one of the best tanks in the world. So it's obviously a lot of damage. So you just need to be careful. Like I said previously, don't just send Ancestral Swiftness for DPS just because you can. If you know your tank is like in a rough pull like this, where their health is going to be yo-yoing, you should be saving Ancestral Swiftness for like an emergency healing surge on them if you can. We are also going to finish these off before we go into the next pack, as we do not want them to come in and hit our tank in the back in the middle of the next pull, which we have experienced before for sure. So it's easier to just finish these guys off. Once again, this isn't a timer key. The timer on this key is very lenient, even on a 19. So we're playing for safety more than we are playing for time at this point. All right, here I'm going to hex one of the Tide Sages, and we're going to do this pull with 2 casters and with a bunch of melee guys. We also have the Sword Toss dude now, which I'm not sure what the mob is called. It's maybe like a captain or something. But they, you can see up here where the mobs are under their health bar. One of my weak auras shows me toss incoming, and I can also see it above my own frames. So every time the toss goes out, that's basically going to hit one person and ricochet to everybody that's within about like 5 or so yards of them. So as a ranged healer, you want to stand out of the group so that if anybody targets you with the sword toss, it just hits you and it doesn't hit the rest of the group. And you also just need to be ready. So if you have a timer, you can tell when it's going to hit your group, and you can just use like a quick chain heal or whatever to put vigor and to just heal people up. The only times this pull is like really, really bad is when these sword tosses completely sync up and you're getting both of them at the exact same time. On a higher key, that can absolutely one-shot people if both sword tosses are going out at the same time. So if it's possible to desync them via a single target stun or CC or whatever, highly advisable that you desync them. Right, and so we have one more pack here. We're just, I believe, we're waiting for the caster to die, and then we have our last pack here with 2 casters and 2 sword toss dudes. Which, once again, easy enough. Just make sure you get kicks on the casters, and you are watching those sword toss timers to make sure that you are ready for when they actually go off. And also, through all of this trash, don't be afraid to use cooldowns. Like if you have to use Spirit Link to save your tank or the group from the sword toss, if you have to use your Lumithar trinket to make sure nobody's getting one shot from the sword tosses, Healing Tide, Ascendance, whatever you need to, just use it here. You don't necessarily need cooldowns on the next boss for any specific points. They're really just to help out in cases of emergencies. So it's better to use what you can to live these pulls than it is to just like hold your cooldowns and, you know, not use them. So as you can see, those sword tosses that I just experienced, I used Lumithar, and nobody's health even barely moved, which is really cool. Lumithar is a very broken trinket. I do advise you to absolutely run the raid and get that trinket if you don't already have it. Alright, and then once these ads are pretty much dead, we're going to pull the boss. We are just waiting to make sure we don't get any extra sword tosses here, as sword tosses during the boss can be kind of crappy. And this is a boss we use Lust for. So if you were keeping track, we used Lust in our very first pull, and then we held it for this boss. For this boss, we find the best strategy is we kind of move up along this coast and sort of just like line our fires like along the coast and to the left and just like move up, and then we loop back around in the circle, as you'll see. It's really important once the ads spawn that everybody stacks up together behind the boss, as it will like lead them into the breath and make it easy for your tank to get all of them. If everybody's really spread out, then the ads will basically go off in all different directions, and it will just make it really hard for your tank to like hit every single one of them every time. But yep, like I said, as you can see, we just like, we lure our fires, or bait our fires, whatever you want to call it, and then we just move up the coast until we get to the bottom, basically at the beach, and we will then loop back around to where we started. For the time bombs, I have my group communicate with me. So they tell me, hey, I have big cooldowns incoming, like don't dispel me. And then I basically just judge it off of that. Obviously, if the healer or the tank gets the dispel as well as the DPS, always dispel the healer or the tank first and let the other DPS chill with the dot for a bit. What I do is when the dots come out, I dispel one right away, and then I dispel the second one a little bit before the next set of dots come out. And that way you won't fall behind and have like multiple explosions happening at the same time, and you'll still be able to sort of maximize how much DPS your group is able to do via those dots. So I'm watching my timer. I have time bombs coming out now. I'm going to dispel someone right away, myself, because it was a healer and a DPS. Obviously, I want the DPS to keep it. And now I'm watching. I have time bombs coming out again in about 5 seconds. So I'm going to dispel my DPS, and then I'm going to get ready for these time bombs. I see I have it on the tank and a DPS, so I'm obviously going to dispel the tank first here as soon as it comes up. There we go. And then I'm leaving it on the DPS until, once again, until I see the time bombs are close to coming out again, and then I'm going to dispel him. Just once again, the only reason like you're not just letting it fully expire, because it's fully healable, it's not like a really rough dot. It does ramp up after a while, but it's really not that bad. The only reason you're not like just letting it chill on people the entire time is that your explosions are going to sync up, and that could be a little bit lethal for your group, especially if they sync up like during somebody getting an anchor shot, or maybe like if an ad is alive and is meleeing somebody. So it's better to be sort of safe than sorry in terms of your dispels. Because once again, the timer in this dungeon is pretty free. So unless you're min-maxing and really trying to go for like the best timer you can absolutely get, it's very easy to just play it safe and do what you need to do to keep the group alive. And as I said before the boss started, don't be afraid to use any healing cooldown you need during this part. You can use Healing Tide is really great for if you have to move while there's damage incoming. You can pop Ascendance as well as Spirit Walker's Grace at any point, and you can also use Spirit Link in case of emergency. Most of the damage from this fight, if you're doing the mechanics correctly, will just be coming from the time bombs whenever you dispel them, so it's kind of nice because you control when the damage is happening with your dispels. The only dangerous combo is when somebody gets the anchor shot at the same time you're dispelling. So I'm not playing that part of it extremely well here. Once again, I'm still getting used to these dungeons and learning them as well. But what I would do in the future if I wanted to play a little bit safer and better is if I see an anchor shot coming out, I'm not dispelling until I'm sure that person is safe. Because here we had a few moments here on a 19 where I dispelled at the same time the anchor shot went out. And because it's a 19, they went very low health, but they lived. But if we were trying this on like say a 20 or something, it might just kill them. So it's always something to be aware of. And there we go. That is Timecap'n Hooktail. Probably the hardest boss. Actually, no, I think on higher keys, the last boss is harder. But I think if you're like in a random pug, Hooktail might be the hardest boss, just because there is a lot of movement and coordination going on. All right, last area is probably the hardest area trash-wise, just because of the pulsars that we'll talk about, and because you have to have a pretty good quick rotation. But other than that, it's not too bad. So we skip the big guardian as it's just kind of a time waste. You can't really pull it with any of these packs the way we want to, so we skip that, and then we pull this little pack with this overseer or whatever he's called. All right, and I'm watching the timer near his health bar. I know that the pulsar is coming out now, so I'm throwing my Riptides on the group to get ready for it. I'm using my Ancestral Swiftness as well as my Unleash Life here. Although it looks like I messed up there and did not use Unleash Life because I think it came off of cooldown right as the pulsar was coming out. So that's one of the things with Farseer you have to remember, or you have to like pay attention to, is once again when your Unleash Life is coming up and when your Ancestral Swiftness is coming up. More so Unleash Life you have to be careful with because it does cost a global. So you don't want to actually be casting Unleash Life while there's damage happening. You want to have things line up so that you can hit it right before, or so that it comes off cooldown right after. This is another part where you shouldn't be afraid to use cooldowns. You will absolutely need cooldowns to heal the last boss, but there's like so much time between these trash packs and the last boss. So as long as you're like spacing your cooldowns out, you will definitely have something for the last boss when you need to. And in terms of our Ancestral Swiftness, I would absolutely sort of count that as like a mini cooldown. So you shouldn't really be doubling Ancestral Swiftness with your throughput cooldowns if you can avoid it, as it like just allows you to do more if you spread them out. However, you'll see there are some situations like this last boss where there is a ton of damage over a medium amount of time where you probably do want to combo your cooldowns. But anyways, for these packs, we're just getting the casters low before we pull the Overseer guy here, the Stargazer, whatever it's called. And we're making sure we keep our kick rotation as well as our CC rotations as we can. I can see next to the guy's health bar, I have about 1 second on a Pulsar, so I'm getting Riptide out on the groups. I'm putting my Cloudburst Totem down. And I have Unleash Life and Ancestral Swiftness for this, and I'm just using my Riptides as fuel for my chain heals and using whatever I need to use to keep the group alive. It also helps if your group communicates with you and lets you know when they have strong damage for the Pulsar versus when they're weak for them, just to let you know how much healing you're going to have to do and whether or not you should be hitting a throughput cooldown or not. Here we have another Pulsar coming out. I can see I have Ancestral Swiftness coming up here, so I'm probably just going to use that, and that helps me heal through these pulses, no big deal. All right, and that's it for this last trash pack. We have one more pack here that we're actually going to pull on the boss. This 3-pack is really simple. You just need to make sure you have a kick rotation on the ritualist. It can get a little bit scary with the boss because you do have the 2 ads that come out that need a kick, but those can just be CC'd. They can be gripped, knocked up, stunned, whatever, and it cancels their kick. They don't recast. All right, and depending on your group and who you're running with, the way that people do this boss is differently. Most recently, we found we get the best uptime for our DPS and our tank on the boss to shorten the timer if I do the collapsing star mechanics. So you'll see me doing the collapsing stars every single time here. For this first one, I'm just going to use a Spirit Link so I start getting it on cooldown. I want it for the next phase at the very end of the fight, just in case, so I'm using it nice and early. I also put a Cloudburst Totem down before I even start healing, and that is going to, as you can see, I just popped it there, so that's going to basically help me get through one of the sets of damage. And then for that last star explosion, I'm just going to let it explode by itself, because I can see it's not lining up with the Hyperlight Spark. The only dangerous part of P1, in my opinion, is when the Hyperlight Spark, which is just like a little chain AoE cast that she does in the group, if that lines up with an explosion from the star, that can very quickly kill people as like just like a one-shot combo, so you need to be really careful with that. On a lower key, you're just going to get 1 star in this phase, but on a higher key, where the boss has a lot more health, you are going to be getting 2 stars. So for this second star, I'll show you like a really, really nice combo that you can do. And that is to, as the star is coming out, you're going to put down a Cloudburst Totem. You're going to make sure you have Unleash Life, as well as Ancestral Swiftness with this combo. I'm going to pop Spirit Walker's Grace, and then after that first explosion, I'm going to pop Ascendance, and I'm just going to rip all of my heals as I keep walking into these with Spirit Walker's Grace and Ascendance up. And that's just going to do like such huge amount of healing to the group. And then for the very last explosion, my Cloudburst is timed perfectly, and that just helps me get through it. And you'll be able to use that in P2 as well for one of the combos. So I would say that's like one of the strongest ways that you can heal this boss. That's it for P1. Obviously P2 is just like a little bit harder if you're the one popping the stars, as there's a lot more you need to be aware of and you have a little bit less time, but you'll see how we do it here. And if you remember at the very beginning of the dungeon, when we were going over talents, I talked about Spirit Wolf. This is where Spirit Wolf comes in handy. So on a very high key, this is very much one-shot territory. I think on the 19, we're all safe if we use something small, but on a 20, we might even have to like use something bigger. But I'm going to try and get Vigor on the group. I haven't fully mastered the timing for it, but you want Vigor on the group for that jolt, and then I want to get into my Spirit Wolf and collect a 20% DR for that cast. Remember, for the Spirit Wolf talent, in order to get the full 20% DR, you have to be in Spirit Wolf for at least 4 seconds. Alright, energy fragmentation is basically these things that you just need to dodge. No big deal, just use your eyes. And then after this, I'm going to start heading towards the middle for the star, the collapsing star, as once again, I'm the one who's going to be soaking. So for this set, see, I'm using Ancestral Swiftness, and I'm just kind of letting it go. And I use Healing Tide there as well. So this fight is long enough and spread out enough for the damage events that you should be able to use at least 1 throughput cooldown, probably even 2 for each of these star mechanics. So this one I used Healing Tide and I used my Lumathar trinket. And then for this last explosion, I'm just going to let it explode. What you have to be careful is in P2, if you're letting any of the like last stars explode by themselves, it's always going to be on the heels of this intermission phase. And if you remember from the first one, everybody takes insane damage here. So if you are letting the explosion time out from the star, you just have to make sure that you're able to top the group up before this intermission phase happens. And use whatever you can. Like even if you have to like send a throughput cooldown, I know it feels bad, but it's better than having your group dying to the stars. So if you let that explosion time out and find yourself low on time, you can just use whatever you need to get the group up. All right, we're going to get an energy fragmentation here at basically the same time as a collapsing star. So in order to time this correctly, I need to take a soak right away, which you'll see me do here. All right, and then I'm going to go join my group, dodge the energy fragmentations. Once I see like the last 2 energy fragmentations, I'm immediately going to start moving up back to that star. As you can see, I'm doing it right now. And I'm going to soak the last few. So I had a weird thing happen here where it didn't knock me back, and so I thought it didn't work. And so I accidentally popped 2 at the same time there, which almost wiped us. Thankfully, I had Spirit Link for it. But what I should have done was popped once, waited, popped again, waited, and then it should have timed perfectly in order to not get a double. But in the case that you accidentally do get a double there, as the timing is really tricky, it's important to have Spirit Link. And that's why I mentioned for the very beginning of the fight, you should use Spirit Link on that very first set of stars that you're popping in P1, as you'll have it back up for when you need it in P2 for an emergency like that. All right, I believe this is our last phase with the star. The timing on this one is not as tricky as it was in the last one. So second star explosions for P2 are probably the worst in terms of timing, just because it's very tight in order to not get hit by the energy fragmentations, but also make sure that you pop the stars in time. We also just had a death there. I think Shad just accidentally walked into one of the energy fragmentations, which is no big deal. So I'm going to soak drain this. I'm going to pop my cooldowns. And then I'm just going to do these normally, and I'm going to hopefully get all of these pop that I need to before the energy fragmentation. And then I'm likely just going to let the last one explode, as always. And don't be afraid with your group to call for AMZs as you need. Like we just popped AMZ there. You can call for darkness. You can really just call for everything that you need to as you need it. All right, and we're going to get one more intermission here. As I said, if you let the stars explode the last one time out, you're always going to be going into an intermission with people who may not be at full health. So it's very important to use whatever you can to make sure that everybody gets back to full health for this intermission. And then as you can see, I'm going into Spirit Wolf for my 20% DR, and I'm also trying to get Vigor on the group for that. However, it's kind of hard to time, especially because everybody's so spread out. So like a one chain heal might just not get it on everybody. But yeah, that's it. So the only hard part about this key, I think, as a healer, obviously there are a lot of tricky moments where people can get one shot or anything can happen, but really like the healing check where you are the hero of the story is this last boss, especially if you're the one popping the stars. So if you're not sure how to do that, just, you know, study the way I did it. That's pretty much foolproof. It'll work every single time. Aside from me popping 2 accidentally, but even that, I mean, if you have Spirit Link, it's no big deal. You can definitely do that. I mean, we just did it on a 19 and lived, so. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'm hoping this is the first of many dungeon guides. I will try to keep the content up, but until next time, I will see you guys later.